The message came on a cold morning in December. Every screen on Earth went dark for 3 seconds. Then the signal appeared. Strange symbols filled the air, floating above cities and villages alike. The world held its breath. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the UESS Resolve, Earth's most powerful warship. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and seen things that kept him awake at night, but nothing had prepared him for this. The symbols changed into words that everyone could understand. The message was simple. Humanity had broken galactic law. They had spread to 17 star systems without permission. They had 40 days to appear before something called the Galactic Council. If they refused, there would be consequences. Read the message 3 times. His hands did not shake. His voice did not waver. He turned to his second-in-command captain and said only one word: war. Was younger than him by 20 years. She had sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She shook her head slowly. Not yet. First, we need to understand what we are dealing with. On Earth, panic spread like fire. People ran through streets. Governments collapsed and reformed within hours. Religious leaders called it the end times. Scientists called it first contact. Everyone called it terrifying. President addressed the world from the Unity Hall in Seoul. She was a small woman with a calm face and iron will. She had led humanity through the water wars and the Great Famine. She would lead them through this too. We are not alone in the universe, she said. We always suspected this. Now we know, but hear me clearly. Humanity did not crawl from the mud, survive ice ages, plagues, and our own stupidity just to bow before strangers who send threats from the darkness. We will answer this summons. We will go to their council, but we will not go as criminals begging for mercy. We will go as equals demanding respect. The world watched, the world listened, and slowly the panic began to fade. Fear remained, but now it had direction. Now it had purpose. Received his orders the next morning. He would lead the delegation. The resolve would carry humanity's representatives to Throne Station, wherever that was. He had 3 days to prepare. He chose his team carefully. Ambassador Lee would handle the talking. She was famous for negotiating peace between nations that had hated each other for centuries. She had a gift for finding common ground where none seemed to exist. She was also completely fearless. Doctor would handle the learning. He was the greatest language expert on Earth. He spoke 40 human languages fluently and had spent his life studying how beings communicate. He was quiet and bookish, but his mind moved faster than anyone had ever met. Captain would stay aboard the Resolve, ready to fight or flee depending on what happened. She did not like this plan. She wanted to be at side, but someone needed to protect the ship, and there was no one he trusted more. The 3 days passed too quickly. On the morning of departure, stood at his bedroom window and watched the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean. He wondered if he would ever see it again. He wondered if any human would. His daughter called him before he left. She was crying. She begged him not to go. He told her that he had to. Someone had to stand for humanity, and he had been chosen. She asked him if he was scared. He told her the truth. Yes, he was terrified, but being brave did not mean having no fear. It meant doing what needed to be done despite the fear. The Resolve launched at noon. Millions watched it climb into the sky and disappear into the blackness of space. Prayers were said in every language. Hopes were whispered in every heart. Ambassador Lee spent the journey studying everything they knew about the Galactic Council. It was not much. The message had included basic information. The Council was old, very old. It had governed the galaxy for 12 million years. It included over 4,000 species. Humanity was species number 7,924 on their list. Just a number, just a footnote. Doctor worked on the language. The Council used a universal translator system, but he wanted to understand the words beneath the words. Language revealed culture. Culture revealed weakness, and they would need every advantage they could find. Admiral Park walked the ship and talked to his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes, but they were also determined. They were human. They had survived worse than this, or at least they told themselves they had. The journey took 12 days. On the final night, could not sleep. He went to the observation deck and stared at the stars. Somewhere out there was Throne Station. Somewhere out there, beings who had traveled between stars while humans were still living in caves had already decided humanity's fate. He thought about President's words, "We will not go as criminals, we will go as equals." He hoped she was right. He hoped humanity could live up to those words. But deep in his heart, a small voice whispered doubts. What if they were too small? What if they were too young? What if the universe simply did not care about one little species from one little planet? The stars gave no answer. They only burned, cold and distant, as the resolve carried humanity toward its judgment. Throne Station was bigger than anything had ever imagined. It hung in space like a metal moon, glowing with lights from a million windows. Ships flew around it like insects around a lamp. Ships of every shape and size. Ships that looked like living things. Ships that seemed to be made of pure light. The Resolve looked like a toy beside them. Captain guided the ship to the docking port that had been assigned to them. Her hands were steady on the controls, but her jaw was tight. She did not like this place. It felt wrong. It felt like a trap. "Remember," she said to before he left, "if anything goes wrong, I will come for you. I do not care about their laws or their rules. I will burn this station to ash before I let them take you." Smiled, it was the first time he had smiled in weeks. "I know you will. That is why I need you here. You are my escape plan." The walk from the docking port to the great assembly hall took 2 hours. The hallways were filled with aliens. Had expected strange creatures, but the reality was beyond strange. He saw beings made of crystal that sang instead of speaking. He saw clouds of gas that floated through the air, somehow alive and aware. He saw things that had too many eyes, too many limbs, too many parts that his brain could not understand. Ambassador Lee walked beside him with her head held high. She did not stare at the aliens. She did not show fear. She smiled politely at everyone who looked their way, as if she was attending a business meeting instead of humanity's trial. Doctor walked behind them, his eyes never stopping. He was recording everything, studying everything, learning everything. He had already identified over 200 different species just from their short walk. His mind was racing with questions and theories. The great assembly hall was a dome so large that clouds formed near its ceiling. Seats rose in circles around a central platform, filled with representatives from thousands of worlds. The noise was incredible. Clicks, whistles, rumbles, screams. Every species speaking in its own way. Every species watching the small group of humans enter the hall. The noise stopped when the 7 arbiters appeared. They sat on thrones high above the assembly, looking down like gods judging mortals. The first arbiter was called. It was a being made of glowing tendrils that shifted and changed color as it moved. It had ruled the council for 300,000 years. Spoke, and its voice filled every corner of the hall. Species 7924, designation human. You have been summoned to answer for your crimes. You expanded into 17 star systems without council permission. You built colonies without council approval. You exist without council recognition. How do you answer these charges? The hall waited. 4,000 species leaned forward to hear what the tiny humans would say. Ambassador Lee stepped onto the central platform. She looked up at the arbiters without flinching. "We answer that we did not know these laws existed. We answer that we found these systems empty and unclaimed. We answer that we came here not to beg for forgiveness, but to talk as one civilization to another." A wave of noise swept through the assembly. This was not how accused species usually responded. Most species cried. Most species begged. Most species offered anything to avoid the council's punishment. The second arbiter spoke. It was called a member of the collective, a species that shared one mind across millions of bodies. Ignorance does not excuse crime. The law is clear. Unauthorized expansion is punished by forced relocation. All humans will be returned to your home planet. You will be forbidden from leaving it. Forever. Did not react. Her face remained calm, but saw her hands clench into fists behind her back. "May I ask a question?" she said. Tendrils flickered with annoyance. "You may." "How many species have you quarantined like this?" Silence fell over the hall. The question hung in the air like smoke. "That information is not relevant to your case," said. "I think it is," replied. "Because from what we have learned, you have quarantined over 300 species in the last million years. You find young civilizations. You tell them they have broken laws they never knew existed. And then you lock them away in their home systems until they die of old age or despair. Is that not correct?" The assembly erupted. Species shouted in support and anger. The arbiters glowed with something that might have been rage. Doctor suddenly grabbed his arm. His face was pale, but his eyes were bright with excitement. He leaned close and whispered rapidly into the Admiral's ear. Listened, his eyes widened. He looked at the arbiters, then back at. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Completely certain," replied. "It is in their own laws. Section 7, Article 12. They wrote the rules and they forgot what they wrote." Moved to side, he whispered what had told him. She listened without expression. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had just spotted prey. She turned back to the arbiters and raised her voice so all could hear. "We reject your verdict. We invoke the right of contestation." The great assembly hall fell completely silent. Even the clouds near the ceiling seemed to stop moving. Tendrils went dark for a long moment. When they lit again, they were trembling. "That right has not been invoked in 3 million years," it said. "Then it is time," replied, "unless you are afraid of what might happen if we succeed." The silence stretched on. The galaxy waited for the answer. The great assembly hall remained silent for what felt like hours. Ambassador Lee stood on the central platform, her words still hanging in the air. The right of contestation, a law so old that most species had forgotten it existed. Doctor watched the arbiters carefully. He had found the law buried deep in the Council's own records during the journey to Throne Station. He had not slept for 3 days while studying it. He knew what it meant. He knew what it required. And he knew why no one had used it in 3 million years. High Arbiter's tendrils shifted from dark to bright orange. This was anger realized, pure, burning anger, that had ruled the Council for 300,000 years. No one had ever challenged them like this. "You do not understand what you are asking for," said. Its voice was no longer calm. There was something dangerous beneath the words. "The right of contestation is not a simple appeal. It is a trial. 3 tests that will measure your species in ways you cannot imagine. Every species that has invoked this right has failed. Every single one." Nodded slowly. "We understand. If you fail even one test, your species will be exterminated. Not quarantined, exterminated. Your worlds will be burned. Your people will be scattered to the void. Your name will be erased from all records. It will be as if humanity never existed." Admiral Park felt his heart freeze. He looked at her face, showed nothing. No fear, no doubt, just calm determination. "We understand," she repeated. Turned to the other arbiters. They communicated in ways that humans could not perceive. Colors flashed. Energies pulsed. Decisions were made in the span of heartbeats. Finally turned back to the humans. "Very well, the right of contestation is granted. You will face 3 trials, a trial of mind, a trial of spirit, a trial of will. You have 1 rotation to prepare. Then the tests begin." The assembly exploded into chaos. Species that had been silent for thousands of years were shouting. Some were cheering. Others were screaming in rage. The council's order had been challenged. Nothing would ever be the same. Captain watched everything through the resolve sensors. Her hands were shaking as she opened a communication channel to Earth. "President," she said, "we have a problem." President listened to the full report without interruption. When finished, the president was quiet for a long moment. "3 tests," she finally said, "and if we fail any of them, humanity dies." "Yes, Madam President." "What do we know about these tests?" Looked at her notes. Doctor had sent everything he had learned. "The trial of mind will test our intelligence. The trial of spirit will test our unity. The trial of will test our character. The council chooses the specific challenges based on our weaknesses. They are designed to be impossible." "Then we will do the impossible," the president replied. "Get me everything you can about previous tests. I want every scientist, every soldier, every thinker on Earth ready to help. We have 1 day to prepare for the survival of our species." The next 20 hours were the busiest in human history. Across 17 star systems, billions of people worked together. Scientists shared research. Soldiers offered strategies. Artists created messages of hope. Children drew pictures of Earth and sent them to the resolve. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted humanity to survive. On Throne Station, Admiral Park paced his small room. He had not slept. He could not sleep. In a few hours, the fate of his species would be decided. Ambassador Lee sat in the corner, reviewing her notes for the 100th time. She had negotiated with dictators and terrorists. She had talked her way out of impossible situations. But this was different. This was not about countries or resources. This was about everything. Doctor was still studying. He had found records of previous species that had invoked the right of contestation. 87 species over 12 million years. All of them had failed. All of them had been destroyed. But as he read the accounts, he noticed something interesting. The species that failed were not stupid or weak. Many of them were incredibly advanced. Some were older than humanity by millions of years. They failed because they tried to face the tests alone. Stopped reading. His mind raced with a new idea. The council expected species to compete as individuals. One representative, one mind, one chance. But humans were different. Humans had survived not because they were the strongest but because they worked together. They shared ideas. They built on each other's successes. They refused to fight alone. He rushed to find and he explained his theory in rapid, excited words. The other species failed because they played by the council's rules. Humanity did not have to. "They expect us to send one person into each trial," said, "but they never said we could not connect that person to every human who has ever lived, every scientist, every philosopher, every soldier, every teacher, every mother and father and child who has ever thought about what it means to be human." Understood immediately. We use the quantum link. We connect the person taking the test to everyone on Earth. They face the trial, but they carry all of humanity with them. Smiled. It is not cheating. The law says nothing against it. They never imagined a species that could work together across star systems. For the first time since they arrived at Throne Station, hope began to grow. The hour came. The 3 trials were about to begin. Admiral Park looked at his team. Ambassador Lee, Doctor, Captain on the screen from the Resolve, President on the screen from Earth. "Whatever happens," he said, "I am proud of all of you. I am proud of humanity. We came to the stars knowing we were small. We came knowing we might fail, but we came anyway. That is who we are. That is what makes us human." The doors opened. The trials awaited. Humanity stepped forward to meet its fate. The trial of mind began in a white room with no windows and no doors. Doctor stood alone in the center, but he was not truly alone. A small device behind his ear connected him to Earth. 12,000 scientists waited on the other end, ready to help. High Arbiter's voice filled the room. Before you is the paradox. It is a mathematical problem that has defeated every civilization in the galaxy for 400,000 years. You have one rotation to solve it. If you fail, humanity dies. Numbers and symbols appeared in the air around. They twisted and turned in patterns that made his head hurt. The equation was massive. It filled every corner of the room. It seemed to go on forever. Took a deep breath and began to work. On Earth, Professor led the team of mathematicians. She was 70 years old and had spent her life studying numbers. She had never seen anything like the paradox. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Break it into pieces, she ordered her team. Groups of 10 take different sections. Look for patterns, look for connections. Share everything you find. The hours passed. Wrote equations in the air with his fingers. The scientists on Earth argued and calculated and tried again. Several times they thought they had found the answer, only to watch it fall apart. 10 hours remained, then 8, then 5. His hands were shaking from exhaustion. His eyes burned. His mind was reaching its limits. Then a young student named O'Mira, barely 20 years old, sent a message. She had been looking at the problem differently than everyone else. She had not tried to solve it with traditional mathematics. She had drawn it as a picture, and in that picture she saw something no one else had seen. The paradox was not meant to be solved. It was meant to be understood. The numbers were not a question. They were a language, a story written in mathematics. Almost laughed when he understood. For 400,000 years, the greatest minds in the galaxy had tried to find an answer. But there was no answer. There was only meaning. The paradox was a message from the beings who had created the universe, hidden in the fabric of reality itself. With 2 hours remaining, spoke his solution to the arbiters. He did not give them a number. He gave them a translation. The paradox meant something simple and profound. Everything that exists is connected. Nothing is ever truly alone. The white room disappeared, was back in the great assembly hall. Tendrils flickered with something that might have been shock. The trial of mind is complete, the arbiter announced. Humanity has passed. The assembly murmured in disbelief. No species had ever solved the paradox. No species had ever thought to look at it as anything other than a problem. The trial of spirit began immediately. Ambassador Lee was taken to a dark chamber filled with screens. On the screens was Earth. Beautiful, blue, covered with clouds and green lands and sparkling oceans. Then the images changed. She watched as fire rained from the sky, cities burned, oceans boiled, billions of people screamed and died. She saw her own family running through flames. She saw children crying for parents who would never come. She saw everything she loved turn to ash. His voice spoke softly. This is your future if you continue to resist the council. Every human will die. Your planet will become a dead rock in empty space. All your art, all your music, all your dreams will be forgotten. We can stop this. All you have to do is accept our rule. Surrender and Earth will be spared. The images continued, horror after horror, death after death, watched it all with tears running down her face. But she did not break. Captain was watching through the quantum link. She had to look away from the screens. The images were too painful, but she could hear his voice when she finally spoke. You think this frightens us, said. Her voice was shaking but strong. We have imagined our own destruction 1,000 times. We have written stories about the end of the world since we first learned to write. We have faced ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We looked into the darkness of the universe and saw how small we were, and we kept going anyway. She wiped her tears and stared directly at where she knew the arbiters were watching. Your simulation is not a threat. It is a reminder of why we fight, not because we are brave, not because we are strong, but because we refuse to let fear make our choices for us. Burn our worlds if you must. We would rather die standing than live on our knees. The screens went dark, the chamber disappeared. Was back in the assembly hall. Her face was wet with tears, but her head was held high. The trial of spirit is complete, announced. Its voice sounded different now, smaller somehow. Humanity has passed. The final trial remained, the trial of will. Admiral Park was taken alone into a golden room. There were no screens, no equations, only a single chair and a soft voice that seemed to come from everywhere. "You have done well," the voice said. It was not, it was something older, something deeper. "Your species has proven its worth. You are truly remarkable, and we have a gift for you." Images appeared. Saw a vast fleet of ships bearing Earth's flag. He saw human soldiers marching across alien worlds. He saw humanity ruling over dozens of species, feared and respected across the galaxy. "All this can be yours," the voice continued. "We will make humanity great. We will give you power beyond your dreams. All you have to do is one simple thing. Help us keep the other young species in line, enforce our laws, punish those who resist. Become our sword and we will make you kings." Looked at the images for a long time. Power, respect, safety for his people. Everything he had ever wanted for humanity was right there, waiting to be taken. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the sun rising over the Pacific Ocean. He thought about every human who had ever lived and died and dreamed of something better. Then he removed his rank symbol from his uniform and placed it on the floor. "I did not become a soldier to make slaves," he said quietly. "And humanity did not survive the darkness just to become the darkness. We are not your sword, we are not your weapon, and we never will be." The golden room vanished. Stood in the assembly hall. 4,000 species watched in complete silence. High Arbiter spoke slowly, as if the words were being pulled from somewhere deep and painful. "The trial of will is complete. Humanity has passed all 3 trials." The galaxy held its breath. Then the impossible happened. An alien species in the far corner of the assembly began to make a sound, a rhythmic sound, over and over. It was applause. Other species joined, then more, then hundreds, then thousands. The great assembly hall filled with the sound of the galaxy cheering for humanity. And on the thrones above, the 7 arbiters watched in silence as everything they had built began to crack. The applause lasted for hours. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years stood side by side, celebrating something they had never seen before. A young civilization had challenged the Galactic Council and won. High Arbiter waited for the noise to fade. Its tendrils had lost their bright colors. They hung dim and heavy like old curtains in an abandoned house. When it finally spoke, its voice was tired. "Humanity has completed all 3 trials. By the ancient laws that govern this council, they are granted full membership, all rights, all territories, all privileges. This matter is concluded." The words should have been a victory, but Ambassador Lee did not smile. She had been thinking during the long hours of celebration. She had been watching the other species. She had been seeing something that the arbiters had missed. She stepped forward onto the central platform one more time. "We do not want membership," she said. The hall fell silent again. Even the species that had been cheering stopped and stared. Tendrils flickered with confusion. "Explain yourself." Looked up at the arbiters. Then she turned slowly, looking at all 4,000 species gathered in the assembly. She spoke clearly so everyone could hear. "We have seen how this council operates. You find young civilizations. You tell them they have broken laws they never knew about. You offer them a choice, submit or die. Those who submit become members. Those who resist are destroyed. And you call this order, you call this peace." She pointed at the rows of seats filled with aliens of every shape and size. "How many of you are here because you wanted to be? How many of you joined the council because it was the right thing to do? And how many of you are here because you were too afraid to say no?" No one answered, but could see the truth in their silence. She could see the fear in their eyes, the old, deep fear of species that had lived under the Council's shadow for millions of years. Admiral Park stepped up beside her. His voice carried across the hall like a soldier addressing troops before battle. Humanity does not want a seat at your table. Your table was built on fear and threats. We want something different. We want to build a new table, one where species join because they choose to, not because they are forced to. One where young civilizations are helped to grow, not crushed before they can stand. Captain's voice came through the speakers. She had connected the Resolve's communication system to the station's network. Every species in the hall could hear her clearly. To everyone listening, you have a choice now. The Council threatened to erase humanity just for existing. They have done this to hundreds of species before us, but we stood up. We said no, and we won. If we can do it, so can you. You do not have to be afraid anymore. Doctor stepped forward with a small device in his hand. The paradox has been unsolved for 400,000 years. The Council kept it as a test to prove that young species were not worthy, but we solved it. And now we are giving the solution to everyone. Free. No price. No conditions. He pressed a button. Across the station, across the galaxy, the solution spread to every species that could receive it. Knowledge that the Council had hoarded for was suddenly available to all. This is what we believe in, said. Knowledge should be shared. Ideas should be free. No one species should control what others can learn. The assembly erupted. Some species cheered louder than before. Others looked confused and scared. A few of the older species near the Arbiter's thrones made angry sounds. But something was happening in the far corners of the hall. A single alien stepped away from its seat and walked toward the humans. It was a small creature with blue skin and large, sad eyes. Its species had been under Council protection for 80,000 years. It had never spoken in the assembly. It had never been allowed to. Now it stood next to Ambassador Lee and said 4 words, "We choose you." Then another alien came, and another. Species that had been silent for thousands of years began to move. They left their assigned seats and walked down to the central platform. Within minutes, nearly a third of the assembly was standing with humanity. High Arbiter watched in silence. Its tendrils had gone completely dark now. For 300,000 years, it had ruled the Council. It had believed that the system was perfect. It had believed that fear was the only way to maintain order. And now it was watching that system crumble. President's voice came through the communication system from Earth. She had been watching everything. She had been waiting for the right moment. To the Galactic Council, she said, humanity came here expecting to fight. We expected to be crushed by your power and your ancient laws, but instead we found something else. We found thousands of species living in fear. We found a galaxy ruled by threats instead of hope. We found beings who had forgotten how to dream. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, kinder. We are not your enemies. We do not want to destroy what you have built, but we cannot be part of a system that hurts the weak and punishes the curious. So we are offering something different, a new alliance. The Free Stellar Compact. Any species that wants to join us is welcome. Any species that wants to stay with the Council is free to do so. We will not force anyone. That is not who we are. The hall was quiet. Everyone waited to see what the Arbiters would do. Finally spoke. Its voice was barely a whisper. What have you done? Looked up at the ancient being. There was no anger in her eyes, only something that might have been sadness. We gave them hope, she said, and hope cannot be controlled. 1 year later, the Free Stellar Compact held its first assembly. 847 species had joined. They met on a station built together, designed by hundreds of different minds from hundreds of different worlds. Admiral Park retired to a quiet colony where he could watch new ships launch into the unknown. He spent his days gardening and writing letters to his daughter. Ambassador Lee served as the compact's first leader for 1 year. Then she insisted the position pass to a non-human species. "We started this," she explained, "but it belongs to everyone." Doctor returned to teaching. His students came from 30 different worlds. He was happiest when he was learning something new from them. Captain took command of the Resolve and led exploration missions into uncharted space. She found 17 new species in her first year alone. All of them were invited to join the compact. None were threatened. None were forced. And on Throne Station, High Arbiter made a decision that surprised everyone. It resigned from the council and asked to join the compact as an ordinary citizen. When asked why, it gave an answer that historians would study for centuries. "In 12 million years, we forgot why we built the council. We forgot that we started with hope too before fear took over. Humanity reminded us of what we lost, and we were ashamed." The galaxy was changing, the old order was fading, and in its place something new was being born. Something built not on fear but on choice, not on threats but on trust, not on power but on the simple, stubborn belief that working together was better than standing alone. On Earth, a monument was built to remember the day everything changed. It stood at the spot where the first alien message had appeared all those years ago. The inscription was simple. "They expected us to kneel. We taught them to dream." People from 100 worlds came to see it. They stood together, looking up at the stars, and wondered what adventures the future would bring. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, new civilizations were waking up. New species were taking their first steps into the void. They were scared and small and alone. But now, when they looked up at the stars, they knew something that changed everything. They knew someone was waiting to welcome them.